a few ideas about a systems view on leadership, since I think that's where we suffer a lot. If you would like to go to a stakeholder model, then our basic assumptions are reasonably difficult to get there, right? Oh, why doesn't it work? You can't move further. You know what I'm going to do?
Are you using your mouse or the arrows on the keyboard?
Thank you for the good suggestion. Now I use the arrows not on the keyboard, I use the arrows on the screen, and that seems to work, no? Good. Point is that we live in a complex world. A complex world is not a complicated world. It is a nonlinear dynamic world in which things are absolutely unpredictable. The reason for complexity is that the reality is created by the interaction of different agents, people, groups, organizations, whatever, and out of that interaction emerges a reality. Now, that's a reality that is ever changing and that cannot be predicted. And we try to battle that for as long as I'm alive, and we should start to appreciate that and to start living in it and using it for the better. Now, a famous example, I won't have time to explain it, to illustrate what complexity is the roundabout. And the traffic light, which is a control-driven system, is replaced by a roundabout, which is a self-organizing system. There are conditions for a self-organizational system to work, and if I have some time, I'll deal with them a little bit later. If that complex world is not bad enough, we have exponential technologies that can have a huge impact, that can have a huge positive impact, huge negative impact, right? And there's still a lot to discover about how to use exponential technologies for the better. But what worries me more is what I like to call the societal exponentialities. And societal exponentialities are things like climate, emission, the broken social contract, inequality, poverty, exclusion, the difference between rural areas and towns, the widening gap between citizens and the system, loss of trust, populism, fake news, and of course, everything that has to do with migration, violence, and integration. That is the reality in which we live. And for that reason, most, if not all, of the important problems we deal with are wicked problems. And a wicked problem is a problem that does not have upfront an easy, obvious solution. There are many, many potential possible solutions, and we have no clue in which direction to seek for the good one. And that is, of course, where leadership hits in to try and move slowly in that better direction. So we need solutions that work, and not that much solutions that are correct or that are researched for 10 years and then are intellectually correct, but they don't necessarily work. So we have to go much more to finding solutions that work. And therefore, a vision is extremely important, right? And I have here this picture of a guy who definitely does not want to be on that picture. And I forced him to be there since it was alongside the vision statement of a beet factory. It's a beet factory close to Nairobi. And the thing is that I was really surprised by their vision statement. And it is there, of course. And if you read the first line, the mission of Kazuri is to provide and sustain economic opportunities for disadvantaged members of Kenyan society. And then you jump to the third alinea, and they say the Kazuri workshop is employing 340, mostly single mothers. And by the way, paragraph 2, we want to be a good beet factory. Now, whatever those people decide, they decide that in order to realize that vision of giving sustainable employment opportunities to disadvantaged members of Kenyan society. If you ever are there, go and visit them, since you feel that when you walk into the building. And I think that is extremely important. So the whole very successful beet factory, and they get orders from the whole world, you know, they are very successful in what they do. And the reason is since they know why they are doing it, who they are doing it for, and what they are doing it for. And I think that is extremely important if you work with wicked problems. Now, for me, I like to speak about values-based leadership in that respect. For me, values-based leadership is an upfront choice for the system as against to the individual. And of course, our prevailing management thinking is what I like to call Cartesian. You know, it's a choice for me and for the ratio. I think, and therefore I am. Now, we shouldn't be surprised in that case that therefore all what we do is just rational, you see, and all oriented to me. So all our leadership theories are control driven. You have leaders and followers, you have targets, you have leadership qualities, 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, it is all very organized in a world that is absolutely changing every 5 minutes. So our leadership theories just don't fit that reality. If that is not bad enough, then we have known the huge success of monetarist liberal capitalism starting in the 80s, and we run too late, but we are now against the walls of what this system has given to us. Everything, according to that theory, is to be monetized. So everything can be expressed in a monetary value. So you can fly and continue to fly, and you just, you compensate your CO2 emission. That doesn't work, of course. You create that emission. And if you don't want to create that emission, then stop flying. As long as we continue flying, we will create that emission. And all the rest is the imagination that you think that you can compensate monetary. In a monetary way, you can compensate your emission. That, furthermore, we are extremely focused on competition, me. So I have to be the biggest, I have to be the best. And all the rest, whatever we do, we just beat them, and soccer world championships, we just beat them, and therefore we are the better team. And we don't even try to measure, and measure is a bad word, we don't even try to measure stakeholder value. Now, if you don't measure it, then it's never going to happen. What is it? Again, my vision. What is the vision if we talk about the stakeholder economy? Who are we doing it for? What are we doing? And that is versus, and I hate to do that in front of Kaushik, but nevertheless, I'll do that. That's, of course, in opposition with Ubuntu thinking. And it's not from Desmond Tutu, but it was Desmond Tutu who at least brought it to the Western world. Suddenly we saw that, hey, this is interesting. You know, you can differently think about really serious problems like a democratization of South Africa in the 90s of previous century. And we can really start from the idea of Ubuntu, which says, I am because we are, or I am since I belong, you know. So it's all the community. And you do it for the community. That doesn't mean that you are not an important part of that community, but you are, since you are part of the community. And that is based on the famous 5 R's: responsibility, reliability, respect, reconciliation, and recognition. So if you really want to get to leadership in a more stakeholder-oriented economy, that are the qualities of that leader. Now, there are different ways to get there. I'm very fanatic myself about the Ken Wilber integral model. I'm not going to explain it in all detail, since most of you, I guess, know it. So you start from a vision and a value and an impact, and what are you doing it for, and who are you doing it for, in order to then find out what are the emotions, what are the lived values that you need in your organization in order to realize that vision, in order to realize that story. Then and only then you go to the organization and you organize your organization in such a way as to realize your vision and your values. Not to make highest profit, not to make the biggest growth, not the biggest whatever. Do that in order to realize your vision and your values, and then you'll reach some societal embedding. Still, you will have to check whether your customers are satisfied, ultimately to come to what I like to call client empathy. Now, that's a mechanism that you can use in order to realize that. One that I really like also to illustrate what a leader in a stakeholder, in a we economy does is what I like to call, how do you activate collective intelligence? And you can do that with soccer, to be very actual. You can do that with flamenco. You can do that with jazz. And the only role of the leader is in that respect is to find intelligent, autonomous, interacting agents. With soccer players they have to be intelligent enough to be good soccer players. They have to be autonomous, since nobody tells them what they're going to do on the soccer field, and they have to be willing to work together. The Belgians are a bad example of that, where it doesn't work, right? In flamenco, that is, you have to have good enough artists. They have to be autonomous. Nobody tells them what they do. And they have to be willing to play together. Secondly, the playing field needs to be defined and understood very well. Now, in a soccer field, that is easy. With flamenco, that's a theater, that's a pub, that is whatever. And all the players are there on the same moment. In companies and in organizations, do we know what is our playing field? What game do we really want to play? And is this clear to everybody in the organization? All players should share a common goal. In soccer, that is making goals. In flamenco, that is creating a joyful event. What is your shared common goal in an organization or a company? And last but not least, you have to agree on a minimum of interaction rules. In soccer, that are the rules of the game. In flamenco, that are the courts within which they play. And once you agree on those minimum interaction rules, then they just start playing, and the whole thing emerges out of that self-organization and interaction of those agents. Now, oops, I again lost my pointer. What you as a leader have to go to is that whole idea of being, you know what, and again, sorry, Kaushik, that I sort of paraphrase you here, but that whole idea of Dasein, that made Heidegger quite famous, that concept of authenticity. You are a leader, you don't play the role of leader. It's the issue of being and not doing. And we became human doings rather than human beings. So what I also took to a huge extent from Kaushik, he should actually give that talk rather than me, is that the artistry of everydayness, neither living in the past nor in the future, is a creative state of mind. And if you leave all baggage behind you, then you're able to be, you are. And that is the space from where true leadership emerges. And not all those leadership theories where you control, you steer, you measure, you know, you make your targets, etc. Now, where am I? I'm here. Good. Once the leader in the system, and I'm going to finish, I like to use the conductor's metaphor to illustrate what a leader should take care of. I'd rapidly go to the lists as I won't have time to really detail it. You only need a leader if there is change. If there is no change, you don't need a leader, right? A leader learns and gives feedback. A leader does not play the music. The conductor doesn't play the music. The musicians play the music. You always play for somebody, for your audience. You don't play for yourself. Good one for leaders. You show confidence in yourself and in the musicians. If you don't trust yourself that you're the right leader, then your musicians will not respect you enough to create with you the event that you would like to create. Your communications should be clear and simple. You have to pay attention to the entire system. You cannot ignore parts of your orchestra. And of course, you have to engage both your musicians, your orchestra, and your audience. Now, I adore this poem as kind of a summary of how you position yourself as a leader. Wonder your footprints are the path and nothing more. Wonder there is no path, it is created as you walk. By walking, you make the path before you. And when you look behind, you see the path which after you will not be trod again. Wonder there is no path, but the ripples on the waters. And as a last one, this one, if you want to build a ship, call people together and give them a desire for the endless sea. That is the role of that leader that can create impact in a stakeholder economy. That's it. I tried to really rush it, I know it, but you only gave me 10 minutes. I don't know whether I got within my 10 minutes, but.
Well, it was thoroughly enjoyable, Walter. We got through more than the 10 minutes. We got through even the question time. But we could, we could ask our colleagues to engage in the chat to ask questions which we might not get to. But we have we can dedicate 1 minute to a question somebody might have. And nobody wants to take that opportunity up. I will just say what Walter Bates has talked about here is the new ontology of leadership, if I can use that word. It's it's the piercing center of the leadership studies field now, where we try to think about leadership as this quality of being, and quality of being in the ongoing present, and how to develop that kind of leadership. So the book Walter refers to, I can put a reference in the chat if anyone wants to look at it. But
yes, with a warm support to read it.
Yeah.
It's exactly the book I referred to.
Yes, and thank you, Walter. I mean, that's a lifetime of work in complexity, and you can see the synthesis that comes through with that beautiful presentation. So let's give Walter a round of applause.
Thank you.
And our next colleagues up for discussion here, we have Rob Prince and Jessica Huntington-Food. I hope I got that name pronounced correctly. And they're here to talk to us about corporate digital responsibility. So it's over to you, and you could share slides. You have 10 minutes, and I'll raise my hand when you get there, and then we'll dedicate 5 minutes to questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. I'll start, but the paper was prepared, the presentation and the paper behind it was prepared together with Rob, who's here as well, and he'll take the floor in a second. So as you said, our paper is entitled Corporate Digital Responsibility, or CDR, from the International Manifesto to the micro enterprise, where CDR is understood as you can see on this slide, a set of practices and behaviors that help an organization to use data and digital technologies in ways that are perceived as socially, economically, and environmentally responsible. And just a word on why we felt that this was relevant, why we were presenting today, and then perhaps in this session. CDR and I guess the concept of innovating to create value is obviously clearly aligned to the question of stakeholder capitalism, where both are putting internal and external stakeholder engagement at the center of what could be a new, more ethical and responsible business model. And leadership, why leadership? Because in general, and from my point of view, particularly for the small companies that I'll talk about in a minute, you need the leader to be driving this kind of change together with the employees, but the leader needs to be there. So in this short presentation, we're going to talk about the process that was behind the development of the International Manifesto, about its key principles, and then just a couple of sort of findings from some work we did with some micro enterprises in Tuscany. So it's a pleasure and an honor for me to be presenting here together with Rob, who's Executive Director at Alchemy in the UK, but in this case, even more importantly, one of the founding parents of the manifesto, and he's going to talk us through the first 2 points. So Rob, over to you.
Thank you, Jessica, and hopefully everyone can hear okay. So CDR I tend to talk about as a global movement. We heard in one of the earlier presentations about ESG and the complexity of measuring ESG. I don't see CDR as a measurement or a benchmark, if you like. CDR is more of a holistic transformational framework that helps organizations to have a more positive impact in the world. From a personal point of view, I'm a technologist. I first got involved around 2016, working as part of a global think tank for Thierry Breton, then Chief Executive Atos, now EU Commissioner, introducing the Digital Markets Act, Digital Services Act, looking at the impact of the digital divide on society. 2016 had been a big year in terms of use of data to impact things like democracy and politics and policies. And on the back of that research, which involved people around the world, we defined one of the definitions for corporate digital responsibility. I later found that had been earlier defined from an academic circles around Germany, perhaps 10 years ago now. And what I found from 2016-17, when we launched our definition, was that there are a number of other people around the world having similar thoughts, similar research, whether that was from government in Germany or the business associations in Central Europe, or academic, for example, in IMD, the business school in the University of Lausanne. A range of people had been focusing on how do we create a more positive impact. CDR Manifesto was an aggregation of all of that thinking. So we brought together people like Michael Wade from IMD. We brought together Saskia Dor, author of the world's first book on CDR in Germany, Tim Frick in Chicago in the US, kind of behind the Sustainable Web Manifesto, and more, and aggregated around a common framework, which is the manifesto. So the manifesto was bringing together the best of all of those definitions and is trying to provide that holistic framework for organizations, government, public, private sector to help transform. That's happening a lot in Central Europe, Germany, Switzerland, as examples. It's spreading out, Italy, Poland, Scandinavia, even Borneo have committed to it, the government changing around CDR principles, and the latest paper was from Singapore, Australia, and the US as well. So it's a global movement. It's embedded in some of the work of the UN. The Code's Global Action Plan for a Sustainable Planet in the Digital Age kind of references CDR. We, the CDR community, are feeding into the current UN Global Digital Compact consultation. So there's a whole pile of reference points. Very quickly, in terms of the principles, it's just trying to kind of focus organizations thinking about the impact in terms of societal and environmental and economical. So purpose and trust is often talked about in the context of defining purpose. Digital ethics, ethical decision making around digital and data technologies, fair and equitable access for all, and promote societal well-being tend to be around things like D&I embedded into product and service design, protecting data, protecting algorithms, transparency of algorithms, digital maturity, addressing digital poverty. Consider economic and societal impact is looking at kind of some of the things that are being used. So the monetization of data, the verification of data or algorithm sources. Accelerate progress with the impact economy is more looking at things like the supply chain, appropriate use maybe of offset, but only verified, and think about how you influence consumer behavior. And then 6 and 7 are talking about the environmental impact, climate change, etc. 7 very much focused on the tech that we use, and 6 in terms of innovating to solve. It aligns quite well with the UN Code's work, which talks about the enablers and then minimizing harms and then innovating to solve some of the world's biggest problems. We've translated it into lots of different languages that you can see on the right. There are more coming. It's about making it accessible to all. And it's all Creative Commons, so anyone can pick up and use it and support, as indeed Resolvo have done. And I'm delighted to kind of pass back to Jessica to talk about the work that she's been involved in doing, Resolvo have been doing in Italy. The most important thing is it's not just an academic framework, it is bringing it to life through the work that we're able to do, helping organisations transform.
Thank you, Rob, and I will just take the floor for just a second to, as you said, illustrate some work that we were doing with micro enterprises in Tuscany. This has been running over 2021-22, some 10 micro enterprises that had actually received public funding for a digital innovation process, and we inserted CDR into their project to see what they were already doing and what kind of needs were emerging. I just want to give you a very quick case study. One of the companies that we worked with, they work on airport safety, particularly monitoring the airspace around runways. And their digitalization project was about flanking human operators with IoT sensors, artificial intelligence and machine learning to improve the systems. Now, looking at the CDR principles that Rob's just presented, what we found with them was, for example, a need to pay more attention to principle 2, fair and equitable access. The IT department was working by themselves to develop this tool, this software, but actually what they needed to be doing was to be interacting with the other sectors of their company and with the users and the operators to see how this technology could be applicable for everybody. They also needed to be looking at training, digital inclusion. Would the people that were supposed to use this system actually be able to use it, considering the advanced technological nature? We also saw a need to focus on what you see here as priority principle number 7, reducing tech impact. So this was hugely energy intensive. We're talking about big data mining, big data, blockchain, and we opened a discussion with them about how they could reduce the impact of that in their software design, but also perhaps in their green procurement of hardware components. And finally, looking at principle 3, promoting societal well-being. So here, particularly in terms of data security, this was, there's a lot of data and it's being gathered, processed, and it's a sensitive area because we're talking about airport security, and the company actually didn't have a cybersecurity strategy in place. So we had a discussion with them about how they could put such a strategy into place, both in terms of the technological requirements, but also behavioral requirements to reduce cyber risks. So that was just one example, but what we found, and I'll close on this, and then maybe we can have questions and we have some conclusions, but I can come back to them after if we have time. What we found was a positive reaction from these companies about CDR, interest, awareness of the potential benefits in terms of risk management, in terms of attracting new staff, in terms of even saving money. But what they found was at the moment, given the size of the small companies, it was too sort of time and cost intensive to be investing in a comprehensive strategy. So what we found was if there was public funding, like there had been in the case of the work that we did with them, they were much more likely to be inclined to take forward CDR processes. I'd like to stop there for a second because if there are any questions, it would be nice to hear from them. We have sort of 3 conclusions, but I want to stop and open the floor just in case there's any comments.
That's wonderful. We've got 5 minutes, Jessica. So
I wasn't sure if that was for me or if that was for the questions. I was
well, for both, you could say.
Okay.
You could use it as you wish here.
Okay, well, let me throw these conclusions out here and then we can see if there's any comments. So basically, we hope that our presentation and the following paper would contribute to the work of ABIS and the colloquium in 3 main ways. First of all, the way that the CDR manifesto was developed and continues to evolve, which Rob discussed. So this participative method of developing such a manifesto. Secondly, the potential synergy of the content of the CDR manifesto and the principles for business in the stakeholder capitalism era that are going to emerge from these 2 days. We see synergies in terms of the need to innovate to create positive social, economic and environmental value. Obviously, we, with the CDR, are coming from a digital starting point, but that's now relevant across the board as businesses everywhere become more digitally oriented. And thirdly, a reminder that the principles, any such principles must, I guess, ultimately be put into practice on the ground, not just in the large corporates, but also in the micro enterprises, right down to the micro enterprises. So the challenge is not just to develop principles, but also to see how they can be put into place and how we can support companies to do that. Rob? Anything I missed?
I just wanted to add kind of one point, which I often have in conversation with organisations, especially large organisations, which is kind of why does it matter and why now? And who's responsible? So the first thing is that the person responsible for this is the CEO. That's the person who sets out the leadership and the direction of the business. And the point is that holistic kind of cover of everything, as opposed to many of these things that fall into silos. And I say that as a previous CXO and deputy CEO in a business myself. Second thing is why now? So reputational damage kind of is one of the key things. So I think as of yesterday, there'd been 2.18 billion in terms of fines under GDPR for data misuse or kind of transparency of algorithms, and the reputational damage, not only in terms of the fines, but in terms of the actions that organizations have to then deal with, is huge. Investment access to money is becoming critical. So private equity has moved to ESG. In Switzerland, Ethos Foundation, who kind of are involved in the management of the top pension funds for the top 200 Swiss businesses, have defined the CDR principles in 2020 and are using that to benchmark long-term sustainability of organizations. So increasingly, access to money is a key part of being able to evidence integrity in the actions that organizations are following through in terms of positive impact on people, community, society and planet. And then the final one is access to talent, because kind of increasingly Gen Z, in terms of people coming into the workforce, are increasingly kind of measuring organizations by being seen and doing the right thing. And whether that's improving position around climate change or minimizing waste or minimizing harms online or clear kind of alignment in terms of ethical decision making and adherence to legal and regulatory positions, that's what they're looking for and that's what they're making decisions on. So just that in the context of Leadership is evolving. There's two books that I would reference that don't talk about CDR particularly, but are absolutely aligned in terms of the things that we've talked about here. One of which is Impact, so Ronald Cohen talking about an evolution of capitalism. And the other is Joe Zammit-Lucia and the New Political Capitalism. And whilst this started in technology and digital, as you say, Neelie Kroes said in 2014, every business is a digital business now, and they certainly are now. And that's why it's critical in terms of the world as we move forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Jessica. Really pragmatic, useful framework. Thank you for that. I think it's got immense value, as Walter's also indicated. We've got 1 minute, colleagues, for anybody who wants to make a comment or ask a question. Yeah. Well, we can always come back to it if we have time, but I want to really thank you for this presentation. It's got such pragmatic value and usefulness as stakeholder management process as well. It's clear. So maybe join me, colleagues, in celebrating this good piece of work.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening.
And that's wonderful. So we had 2 excellent discussions thus far. We move on to the third discussion. And the third discussion, trying to get the details for it here. Do we have our third speaker with us?
Yes.
Adeze. Please remind me if I
Yes.
get the name correctly, Adeze Okaya.
Yes, it is. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we look forward to your presentation very much. And you can share your slides with us if you wish.
Yes.
Excellent. There we are.
Thanks.
And you have 10 minutes, Adeze. I'll raise my hand when you get to that point. And you can use your time flexibly because we'll have 5 minutes left for discussion or your use. Go for it.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share what is exploratory work, but ideas I'd been working on for some time about amplifying voices and agency. So a lot of what had been said today, even in the main session about impact, about other voices, come up here. So this work actually looks at a particular ethical philosophy that comes from the southeastern part of Nigeria, which is well known for entrepreneurship and for business. And so this is about seeing what synergies, what directions, what contribution that sort of ethical framework can make to this debate, so that it isn't always about top-down, what has been decided, because some of the problems have been top-down. So maybe times to get other contributions in. So the issue, I guess it's been stated today, it's the global paradoxes. So there has been huge wealth creation, innovation, but alongside that has come inequity, very evident in Africa, a lot of environmental degradation, even for little contribution to global warming from Africa. We've had a significant impact, and poverty. And so it reminds me a bit of Annan in '99, talking about a human face to global markets, and Freeman, who we'll hear from tomorrow, saying clearly that the current varieties of capitalism have increased the divide, both within and across countries. So Africa has borne the brunt of that as well. So because I'm coming from the African context, and this is one state within Africa, but what I'm trying to portrays the fact that there's a lot to offer. So in terms of growth, in terms of the future, in terms of sustainability, this is a continent that is rich in both renewables and non-renewables. It's a country with the youngest population in the world, and it is a country that will fuel the human, it's a continent that will fuel the human capital of the future. So in many ways, both as customers, as future innovators, as people who will be hosts, as people who will be participants on different levels. They are stakeholders of the future. So the lack of inclusivity is seen very clearly in many African countries. And although we talk a lot about the SDGs, the UN SDGs, it's important to note that Africa has its own blueprint, a 50-year blueprint called Agenda 2063, where it's talking about inclusive and sustainable growth and development. And some of the things that come out through there are greater agency, human capital, sustainability, cultural identity, and inclusive growth. So this sort of feeds through to the kind of indigenous philosophies coming out from within the continent. So what could this sort of philosophy, stakeholder capitalism in general, offer African businesses and markets? Why are we interested in this? I would say it's because there is that potential for this type of capitalism to emphasize freedom, more rights, the creation of obligations and contributory consent-based processes, which I think is missing from the existing dominant variety of capitalism. So, but it isn't just what we are to gain from it. It's also what African agency can contribute, its own philosophies about ways of being. So I was glad to hear about leaders being, because then I thought, oh, it's a sense of how do you contribute, not just as a recipient, and how do you contextualize? Part of this has been a lot of top-down globalization without there being a feeding up from other stakeholders and the privileging of one category over all others. So I want to introduce this philosophy, which is a philosophy that comes from the southeastern part of Nigeria, where I'm from. And it's a philosophy that has been put into practice in different ways and written about to some extent, but it's only beginning to gain some popularity. So it's an Igbo word called Igwebike, and it means that there is a strength in association or numbers. So there is a strength in that unity. And so the Igbos as a group have been recognized through various research as incubators of indigenous African enterprise. So they're very prone to business, to commercial activity, both within the culture and in growing national enterprises of various sorts. So they're small emerging industries themselves that have put this into practice. There is general philosophical questions about whether this is uniquely Igbo or whether it's a universal philosophy interpreted through Igbo lens, but that will be a question for another day. What is good about this, or unique or different? I would say two main things, but I point to others as I go on. The communal nature of Igwebike does not actually delete or diminish the individuality of the human person. So it's always sometimes viewed as, oh, do we all have to become one? Igbos privilege the uniqueness of the individual, the specialization of the individual, and the fact that one individual may actually be wealthier than the other. However, they also understand that you draw that sense of being a success, not just from the individual lens, but also from the lens of a community that is of a good standard. It is also, second thing would be, it's embedded in culture. So it's embedded in stories and practices. In a sense, it's what I think, when I go on to suggest, a need for this to go into corporate culture, where it isn't at the moment. So it's embedded in stories. Things Fall Apart is written by Chinua Achebe, which is an Igbo author, And he has this phrase where he talks about a man who calls his kinsmen to a feast is not doing it just for saving them from starving. He wants to also see that this is a good thing to do. It is not just intrinsically about saving people, but it's also about being essentially what we do as kingsmen and being human. So it means this is inclusive action in unity, but it still respects the individual person. There are common goals, common interests, but then you exercise things as individuals, but towards that common goal. And so these goals are set as a people in unison, and it then gives the impetus, the vision for inclusive action, but it gives the vision which the individuals work towards. So I sort of listed out a bit quickly what is I feel is unique, or what I've found to be unique. I think first would be, it's not holistically communal. It's not just about everything has to go to the community, because it recognizes incentives. It recognizes that there might be people better at certain things. There might be people who respond to different kinds of incentives. It recognizes a choice of community and within community. So there's a consent-based process to this. You want to be of a people and you identify with those people. It cites the complementary nature between the individual and his community and the mutual existence that they both have, while recognizing that choice. It has a very key role for mentoring and apprenticeship-based learning. It's something that has been written about. It's something that the Igbos are very strong with. And of course, I just mentioned it intertwines with culture in its everyday storytelling, so it recreates itself. It has a human-centered approach to development. So this is something that I say might be a drawback in the next slide. I recognize within the drawbacks that there are many philosophies within Africa, so we don't expect them to just produce one philosophy. There are links between the philosophies like to Ubuntu, but certain philosophies like Ubuntu appear slightly more communal in perspective than this would. And each of those perspectives, because this is a continent of about 54, 55 countries, makes a valid contribution and shouldn't be reduced to one. There is a sense in which, because it's very individual, human focused, communal focused, you find that issues of environment and climate tend to be filtered through human lens, but there is also a space for debating about those goals being set by community in a way that respects nature. And there are clashes, trade-offs. So in a sense, there is the popular one between your global narrative and your local perspectives, but even within those local perspectives, there are trade-offs to be made. And again, there needs to be a kind of ranking as to how we make those trade-offs. It's a call I put, there has to certainly be more time put for researchers like myself towards mapping overlaps between different kinds of African ethical philosophies, but also within this one and the dominant Western one, mapping some of the overlaps and complementarities. I wanted to point out some practical implications. So when we talk about stakeholder, engaging the stakeholder in a place like the natural resource industry, which I know the examples from, it would involve active engagement and listening to their way of being, as well as you imposing your governance methodologies. It would mean inclusivity of voices from below. It would again have an impact on the way corporate culture is viewed as a vehicle of stakeholder capitalism, because sometimes the practice, the culture is more prevalent and has more impact in these host countries than any of the theories or any of the actual corporate board dissemination material. And then there's an impact for apprentice-based learning. This is something that has been taken up already by the Harvard Business Review article, looking into the fact that the apprenticeship system is also an indigenous system within this whole wider framework. And that could mirror perhaps engagements which the companies have with these communities in the way of doing business if they were really serious about stakeholder capitalism. Just a few more points and that will be the end. So it may have impact on the measurements for business success. At the earlier session, there was this question of impact directly and indirectly, but measurement, a sense in which measurement is moving away from just being profit, but even the way profit is measured may need to take into account this we or this Igwe the association. So this ties in with the earlier talk as well. So measurements that will be able to capture more than this, capture perhaps development on the grounds of apprenticeship-based learning, capture dissemination, capture other things. So also length of period of impact. So we are very short-term focused, but we need medium and long-term. It also is the type of ideology that brings closer business and society and brings closer the dream of having a global partnership or a partnership between business and the community or the state in developing those shared development goals. So with Africans' own agenda, this would actually fit more with business that can do that overlap, because it's hearing voices of the stakeholders and taking into account their own ideologies as well. So this is where I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Adeze. Thank you for that. It's really, really nice for you to bring this to our attention, because, you know, African philosophy is wide and varied, although interrelated, and it's nice to bring out the nuances. So I thoroughly do appreciate that. And we've run out of time for discussion, but I hope our colleagues here will make contact with you or share comments directly with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, but let's give her a round of appreciation for Adeze. And we are in your hands, Carolina.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kaushik, for chairing this track, and thank you for the contributing authors. I really appreciated your contributions. There was a question for Adeze from Michael Winter. Maybe I will put you in contact after the conference so that you can maybe answer to him. I know that he also had to leave. I left a poll in the chat, and please just indicate if you will be able to join us for the practical session tomorrow that hopefully these insights will feed into. I will not take more time, as yes, the colleagues in the other tracks are also finished, and we will go back to the main room for a short conclusion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, please. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, if he sends me the email, I will reply and send some of the material. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome back. from the research and cases presentations. I'm not sure exactly how many people are going to stay for the conclusions and how many are on their way from the breakout room to the main room. So I'm going to take it a little slowly.
The breakout rooms are now closed.
Okay, thank you, Katka. So as you might have seen in the program, this session was supposed to be closed by our CEO, Ivo Matzer, who sends his apologies, and unfortunately he could not be here with us today. Sometimes, you know, life doesn't really follow any schedule, any event. And I'm very happy to share that I think we created really a nice culture here at ABIS that also expands to the overall network, and we really have 3 values that we also see in our everyday work, and in the way we organize this conference, and also in the way the participants participated and the speakers also shared. And these values are care, courage, and trust. So thank you for being part of it, and I'm sure these are very valuable also to you. So I would like just to conclude saying that we dealt with many topics today. So of course we are really experiencing many global challenges with you know, some good elements in it, but mainly weak problems that we need to deal with. And we thought that tackling stakeholder capitalism could be part of the solution. So in the earlier panel and discussions and the opening speech, we talked about impact, stakeholder engagement, inclusion and inclusivity. And we also had the pleasure to hear many contributions during the research and cases presentations about theoretical, ethical, leadership, governance, and also very practical models. So thank you so much for the presenters who also contributed today. Lastly, I would like to also thank the track chairs who helped us organizing this event, and also to my team. Please let us know whether you will be able to join us tomorrow for the whole day. Of course, we are waiting for you during the whole day, both online and offline, but especially in the interactive session. There was a link shared with all of you during the research tracks. Maybe my colleagues can drop it now. Thank you, Antonino. So we really hope that the insights that we gathered today will be fitting into definition of a set of guiding principles that can help businesses to implement stakeholder capitalism and do business in a more responsible way. So this is all today from our side. I really look forward to seeing all of you either virtually or in person tomorrow. And I wish you a good evening or good day ahead of you, or a good night wherever you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you.